Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here is your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, February 4th, 2026. Welcome to another episode of the weekly nonprofit podcast, People in Fundraising. And today I get to reconnect with Amy Begg, who I have known almost since day one in my career and have really enjoyed learning from her, serving with her on the NEDRA board when she was the president. And just delighted, Amy, to see you again and have you share your career journey with our audience today.
Thank you, Tim. It's so nice to see you as well. And I'm not sure if I should say how long that's been, but it's been at least 1 or 2 decades that we've probably known each other. But I'm delighted to see you and talk with you again.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. And I'm just reminding myself as we're starting this that I last saw you in person at the PD conference in Seattle, where you were so awesome. You know I don't drink alcohol. And we were talking with Drew of Alma Base, and you went out of your way to hunt down a glass of chocolate milk for me. And that just made me feel really included. And I appreciate that.
I guess once a mother, always a mother. Everyone should have what they need at all times. But yes, of course, I was happy to do that.
Oh,
I didn't want you sneaking off because it was fun to reconnect, and I wanted to make sure that you were enticed to stay with us in the conversation.
It was very thoughtful of you. Thank you. I know a little bit about your career history, but Amy, if you could please take a few minutes and tell our audience about how you entered the fundraising profession and where you're at these days.
Okay, so now I will for sure age myself because I entered into this profession by responding to a newspaper ad that said researchers wanted, not science. And it was for the Foundation Fighting Blindness in Baltimore, Maryland. And so I applied for the job. I interviewed. I had absolutely zero idea about what they were talking about during the entire interview process. I had really no idea that development as a field or advancement as a field existed. Received the job, fell in love with it. And unfortunately, Maryland wasn't the right move for me. I'm a native New Englander, and I was young, and a lot of friends and family were getting married and having babies. So I ended up leaving Foundation Fighting Blindness and ended up working in Manhattan at the YMCA of Greater New York for a number of years, which I just really loved and enjoyed. And then started to do some consulting work as well. And back in 2003, I guess, is when I saw the job for Harvard. And I felt as if I had self-taught as much as I could. And I wanted to come to Harvard to learn more, and then spent the better part of my career at Harvard, returning several times. So returning in 2005, I had left with Beth Pearlberg to go to Asian University for Women and do consulting, and then returned to Harvard not shortly after that, and then left again shortly after in the pandemic in 2021 to set up a crypto mining business, and then ended up at Emory University for a brief bit in Atlanta before being recruited by HBS, Harvard Business School, to come back. And that was a difficult decision because I loved Emory, but Boston was home. And at that point, we were setting up cryptocurrency in Texas. And so going between Texas, Atlanta, and Boston was hard. So it just made more sense to go Texas to Boston.
Right, yes. No connecting flights.
No connecting flights, that's right.
Are you still doing the crypto business?
We have since sold the warehouse in Texas, and we're more traders. We were doing the mining part of it, which is why we needed the warehouse and all of the electricity. But when Ethereum went to proof of stake instead of proof of work, that's when we shut down the miners.
Okay.
That's probably another podcast about crypto.
Well, I'm very intrigued with your career journey. So much time spent in the Harvard ecosystem. I was there for over 17 years myself. Connected with you through, those alumni affair and development annual conferences, and then NEDRA certainly. I'm just curious, Amy, what elements about the opportunity at Harvard Business School drew you back? Maybe certainly there was the piece you talked about going between Dallas and Emory and New England, but were there opportunities specifically at HBS that you felt like this gets me what I want, but also challenges me professionally?
Yes, that's a great question. So I spent most of my career, about 18 years at the university at AA&D, for those of us that know the Harvard lingo, but alumni affairs and development, and then left, like I said, to start up crypto after 6 months of hiring electricians and running the crypto, which virtually runs on itself. I was looking for some other opportunity, and I had a boot camper from NEDRA
Oh,
introduced me to Emory and said there was an opportunity there. And I really enjoyed my time at Emory. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. It was very different work, but it
yeah,
was a lot of fun. And I had a great team there that I still keep in touch with, many of them today.
nice.
Uh, Personally, there were some things at the same time that I was at Emory, I was also doing some consulting work for HBS and just helping them bring the research team uh, more into the forefront. I think it had slipped into the too much into the back. I know we're a services provider similar to IT, but I think we had lost our seat at a lot of the table
Mm,
that we should have been at for a variety of reasons over the course of time. And so that was intriguing to me. And I also had some personal issues going on that were bringing me to Boston more. So it was much harder to split my time between Texas, Boston, and Atlanta. And so when Janet Cahill makes you an offer, it's really hard to say no. It's almost impossible because she's just such a force of good. And you've worked with her.
yes.
It's not that she's persuasive, it's that if she were selling me the Brooklyn Bridge, even though I know it already exists, I'd probably buy it. So, so there was a lot of opportunity at HBS, and when I was doing some of the pre-work to identify some of the challenges that had existed, all of the frontline fundraisers, many of whom were my friends because Harvard is very uh, moves around quite a bit. Everyone seems to go from one part of Harvard to the next. Um, they really wanted to have more of research at the table. They really wanted to have more interactions with research. And uh, that felt like something that I could help facilitate and have since done, where we brought back the researcher as a consultant model to HBS. So the researchers are now assigned to specific fundraisers, and the research is no longer going through a work front queue,
Oh,
which I think I hope has been better for everyone. And so
sure.
and then let's be honest, as a researcher, is there anywhere more fun to research a pool of prospects than Harvard? And how about Harvard Business School?
Right, yes.
Uh,
Yeah, it's like I hear these names on the radio driving to work, and oh, I'm going to research them later this week. Yeah.
yes, exactly. It's fun. It's fun. And as somebody who's a diehard prospector, like my very first job, I so enjoyed doing prospecting. It was one of the things I enjoyed most. To have that pool to do prospecting from is just so much fun.
Oh, absolutely. Totally. I mean, you go from the Robert and Jonathan Crafts of the world to Wall Street executives to people on the West Coast and elsewhere doing startup technology. And like some of my favorite prospects from way back when were the people who co-founded Cloudflare, I
Out
believe.
there, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And Moderna,
Yes. Yeah.
yes,
Absolutely.
I mean, during 2021, the IPO year, it was crazy. And what's really funny is sometimes, Toby, who's a mutual friend of ours and somebody that's been in the industry for a very long time. Toby will often say to me, Amy, how come I saw a reading go in on a Saturday or a Sunday from you? And I'm like, because I have my work to do. And then when I have stuff where I just want to play, I feel like on the weekend, somebody can tell me what I have to do. That's when I get to do most of my prospecting these days.
Oh, that's good. And I had completely forgotten about work front. So thanks.
Well, sorry to bring that memory back up.
Oh, well, thank you, Amy. I often ask guests who have held or currently hold senior volunteer leadership roles in these podcast interviews about their experiences. Part of why I do that is just to enlighten other nonprofit leaders who may be listening in, watching in, and considering ways of contributing, giving back in a larger volunteer way. So for you, both within the profession and then outside in higher education and elsewhere, you have had an extensive portfolio of volunteer roles. I mentioned you were the NEDRA president when I was on the board. I'm just curious if you want to talk a little bit about those roles by institutional name and how have those assignments that you've taken on enriched your career?
Sure. I think being a part of the NEDRA board, to me, I signed up when my son Cody was reached a certain age where I felt like I could give back and and also learn from others. So my time on the NEDRA board was very special to me. The cohort of people that I served on that board with are and will always be lifelong friends. It has opened up so many doors. I can go anywhere and pick up the phone and get advice or help with any question I might have, even resource advice. We're frequently on email chains, even still, people that I served with the board on. So I would encourage people to get involved with their professional organizations because it's so critical that we give back, but it's also critical that we learn. I think serving as president of the board was a great honor for me. It just gave me the experience and exposure to all sorts of different parts of the work. So
Yeah.
obviously putting on conference and educational content for our members, but also looking through the eyes of sponsorship and bringing on those sponsors and all that goes into planning a conference
Yeah.
and the website and all of these other pieces that don't necessarily have a lot to do with my day-to-day work, like a workshop or planning the content of a conference would,
Sure.
so that was really interesting in forming those relationships. So it was a very special time, and your time on the NEDRA board and now on the Apra board, congratulations, Tim. I think is just it's wonderful to have people that have been in the industry give back and offer advice.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
And from a I guess the other boards that I've served on is I served on my alumni association board at Plymouth State University, which led to serving on the university system board for the state of New Hampshire, which was the four public colleges and universities: UNH, Plymouth State, Keene, and at the time Granite State College, which has now been folded under the UNH enterprise. Was very special because here I am now on the other side volunteering with philanthropists and most of the board. I was elected as the student body, I'm sorry, as the Plymouth State student alumni rep, but most of the board was elected by the governor of the state of New Hampshire. So it was very interesting and very insightful to hear how people think from the business world about development.
I can imagine.
I remember at one meeting somebody said, "Oh, development brings in money. Well, let's just hire 50 more development officers." And you're like, well, it's not that simple. There's the whole infrastructure that supports those development officers, and you have to do a feasibility study to determine like what the capacity might be of the prospects. But it was very fun and it was really interesting, and it gave me good experience and exposure.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I can relate. You mentioned, Amy, being at a point in your family life where you had a little more bandwidth. Someone's at a certain age, and I've felt the same, with my family. My wife and I have 4 kids, and I started this when our youngest was 8, because I anticipated, and I'm already here. It's frightening how quickly time passes. But I anticipated, there'll be a time soon when my family's independence will be at a point that I can take on some other adventures and do some things that I enjoy. And I'm glad I started it then, rather than being at a point, now, almost 5 years later, and being like, okay, now how do I get this off the ground? But it's still a tricky balance. So
For sure. It definitely is.
yeah. Well, I admire people like you because for the reasons you just talked about, you are a very active professional in your day job. You're rating prospects on the weekend, but you've been giving back in very significant ways. In your case, through NEDRA, you've done the prospect research boot camp through NEDRA for so many years, and then as you just talked about the UNH system, and I just think that example is so helpful to other people. And I remember being on the NEDRA board at the time and, totally green. And I'm like, Amy's the president and she's doing this. And she's got, a very significant role across the river at Harvard AA&D. And that's inspiring to me. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I think that they all complement each other in some way, which is very interesting, right? So it feels on the surface, it could appear like extra work, but
Yes.
When you break underneath, it's all very complementary of each other. Serving on the board of the university system for the state of New Hampshire with those leaders helped me as president of NEDRA, because you can imagine when you have a board, when you have a governor in a state that flips every 2 years, and the turnover and their governor appointed. So there could be tension and conflict on that board, but people worked through it because we all were there for the mission. And so that helped me. There wasn't as much tension and conflict on the NEDRA board, but there were times when we weren't all in disagreement, and it helped me figure out the way to make sure that all voices were heard, I hope, so that we could have thoughtful discussion and come to a unified decision.
Yeah, that's so important. And it's a delicate leadership balance that you have to learn through the experience of it.
That's right. That's right. And it certainly helped me in my career.
That's great.
But I'll leave it at that.
Well, my next question here, I've posed it to Aaron and Chris Lawler, who you know through the Harvard landscape, and they're some of my favorite people in Boston in nonprofit work. I had him on as guests about 2 years ago. And so now I'm going to resurface this quote from the then Harvard University president, Larry Bacow, who in the December 2022 issue of Harvard Magazine wrote something very insightful. And I think to me, it sums up the clear is kind mentality of we can find purpose and enjoyment and be in agreement with a lot of things that the institutions we are affiliated with are doing or saying. But at the same time, it doesn't serve anyone well if we are just in lockstep all the time. So I'll read the quote first, and then if you can please just share some reflections on how it speaks to you and your affiliations. So again, President Bacow once said, quote, being a loving critic of our institutions and our communities requires a great deal from us. Though we need to be respectful of our traditions, we should not be unwilling to depart from them. Similarly, we have to be willing to ask difficult questions, end quote. So anything come to mind as you got this ahead of time and reflected on what it might mean for you?
Sure. I didn't realize Aaron and Chris were also asked this question. I'm curious, was it before everything that's gone on
That's great. Yes.
or after, because it seems very apropos in the moment, given everything that has gone on at the institution.
For sure.
I think I agree with him. I think if we I often equate it to the yes syndrome that some celebrities have fallen into, where people will say yes to everything to the point where it's so damaging that it's not just their reputation, but perhaps their life has come at this cost.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think it is important to question the organization. I think it's important that I'm very mission driven. So wherever I go, it's because of the mission of the organization. So that's an important value to me. And so I think the questioning comes out of that deep care and relationship to the organizations that I have. There have been times, even on the NEDRA board, there was a time, I can't remember if you were on the board or not, but there was a time where we were faced with something that was very challenging around an organization, around a person applying from an organization that may not have aligned with NEDRA's values.
Oh,
And how do
yes.
you separate out the person from the organization and also give the person a fair shot, because we shouldn't judge somebody by where they work. So and I think we did a good job of navigating that through the process and the interview process and all of that. And I think the outcome, we all felt as good as we could feel about it, or I felt pretty good about it. But I think it's in having these hard and difficult conversations that makes our organization stronger. And so I'm a big believer in not being a yes man, challenging things. And I've had challenging leaders come in, and under those leaders that have been very challenging and have wanted to change a lot of things, we've learned a lot and we've reinvented ourselves. So I think that if you can look for the opportunities in those challenging times, um, then if you focus where the good is, that's where you'll go. If you focus where the bad is, that's where you'll go. So I try to always focus where the good is, because I prefer living in a world of of happiness and chocolate
Yes.
milk.
Yeah, I like that. And I feel like, you can build on goodness. Whereas if you take the opposite approach and everything's negative, it's all critical, then you're going to lose me in the conversation pretty quickly. And I'm not going to be as engaged in trying to brainstorm solutions if all it is a hack job about XYZ.
That's right.
And I
That's right.
think, I think as a society and in our own personal lives, just learning how to disagree better is a real critical need. So
Yeah,
tough.
I would say learning how to disagree and also taking ownership. If you did try something and it didn't go well, it's okay. I think people are much more accepting of people taking ownership, and I think that's been some of what's been lacking more recently, at least that I've been experiencing. Would rather just say, "Oh, I didn't," instead of taking ownership. I press on, but
Mhm.
I don't know if that makes any sense. But
Well, I think I may know a little bit of where we're going there, but but some of the things that kind of madden me about not taking ownership is, oh, I didn't see that. Oh, I didn't. Oh, they said that. I didn't see that. No, I haven't. Let me go watch it or read it, and then I'll have a response. I'm like, no, you know exactly what some people are saying and doing, and don't hide behind this.
that's right. That's
Take
right.
ownership. Yeah. uh, Fun times.
Yes, it's been fun. I think we're coming towards the other side of it, but it's
Yes.
not been the easiest time to be at Harvard.
That is true. Well, I really like asking some questions, and everyone gets these questions ahead of time as their guests, that get at who the people are whom I'm having on as guests on this podcast, not just the professional side of them. And so being able to highlight kind of who Amy Begg is outside of work. Are there things you'd like to share, that kind of makes your life feel richer, gives you purpose, like living in a world of happiness, as you said? Are there elements of your life outside of your profession that spark that happiness for you?
Yes, there definitely are. I would say first and foremost, probably for you as well, is my family.
Yeah.
I am lucky to uh, have the most amazing partner in life, and in marrying him, I was able to gain 2 additional children. So it's always funny when I say I have three 23-year-olds. People
Oh,
look at me like, you have triplets, but actually only one's mine. But those 3 children give me such joy. And Cody, my son, has given me joy from the moment I was probably pregnant with him. And Luke and Maddie have given me joy since I've gotten to know them. So through the various stages of life. So for me, family is definitely a lot of who I am. I also am athletic. I'm excited for the Olympics uh, opening ceremony on Friday.
awesome. Yes.
Cody has someone he skied with that's competing this year, so that's really special and fun. But I would
Fun.
say family and just being outside and enjoying life and living life are probably the things that get me going.
Yes. Yeah. That's wonderful. I really enjoy learning a bit from guests about, who they are, um, all around, the well-rounded nature of people on this podcast. And um, so thank you for sharing that. I have to ask what your backdrop is. That Widener
I,
Library?
I think it is. I
Okay.
tried to get HBS, but I couldn't download the HBS one for some reason. It's since changed, but I think it's
Okay.
Widener. I just wanted to be in a library because it makes me feel very comfortable.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I should have mentioned that a very, very long time ago when I was probably 10 years old, I had an aunt who was from Greece, married my mom's brother, and she worked at the Yale Library in research and then went on to work at the United Nations doing research. So I think probably she had some influence on my career, although I didn't directly follow in that plan, but I
Sure.
always admired her. So
Oh, that's very touching. I
the
like that.
libraries is where I feel at home.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, one of my last, yeah, so I left HBS in April of 2018, and I knew I had to turn in my ID card for the gym and all sorts of stuff, unspooling the connections of my life at Harvard. And one of my last nights that I was still an employee in Harvard, I said to my wife, I'm going to work, and then after work, I'm going to Widener Library and I'll walk around Widener, the stacks and whatnot for about 2 hours. I'll be home for late dinner. Um, and that was really like it was really important to me because I love libraries. And I knew that once I turned in my ID card, I'm never getting back into Widener.
Yes, and the Harvard libraries are very special because of all of the history that's in those walls.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's a special place. Well, I'm hoping to come to the NEDRA conference in about 2.5 months. So I'm not sure if you'll be there, but um, we'll see how that works out. But if you are there, I'd love to see you again.
I would too. I'm undecided, but I would if I am, I will definitely let you know, and I would love to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Amy, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really a delight to reconnect with you. And it's been super long since we last saw each other, but it's nice to just pick up right where we left off.
Same, Tim. It's always so great to see you. And I know I said this before the podcast, and you can edit it out if you want to, but I really think somebody should do a podcast on your podcast of interviewing you because you have so much to offer to this field. And I've just learned, for those out there in podcast world, I've just learned today that Tim is a member of the Apra board, and I think that that's so fantastic because you have so much to give back to this community. So thanks for doing that.
Oh, that's very sweet of you. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that, Amy. And yes, I think maybe at some point, maybe my 500th episode, I will turn the tables and and someone can ask me a bunch of questions and we'll go from there. I'm very comfortable asking the questions, though.
I know. That's an easier spot to be in.
Yes, yes. It's kind of like the prospect researcher. Like, tell me about yourself, and here's the narrative. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Amy. I wish you all the best, and I hope our paths cross again very soon.
Likewise. Thanks again, Tim.
Yes, and for our audience, you'll be able to find Amy Begg's conversation across the various platforms that you listened to, tune in over the last 4 years. Her interview will air in March of 2026. They always air on a Monday with links on LinkedIn to the YouTube, as well as Podbean for people that like to listen to the podcasts. And then thanks to my 100th guest, Luis Diaz of WISE and the Donor Participation Project, he is sponsoring my website where Amy Begg's conversation will be, and that is peopleinfundraising.wordifysites.com. So thank you everyone for your support of People in Fundraising, and we'll be back next week with another episode. And Amy, I wish you all the best.
Thanks. You too, Tim.
Thank you.